expanding highways, it increases car dependency and car centrism, but it also wouldn't make your trip here any quicker. I also had to take I-35 to get here. That's the situation that we live in. But we know we've got over 70 years of data that shows that expanding a highway never, not once, actually relieves a region's congestion problems.
Explain this to me, right? And I believe there's a term for it, like maybe a scientific term where it increases demand. Is that what's going on? Simply that you make the highway more attractive, wider, so-and-so, and now demand increases, for more people want to take it, or more people think it will be quicker? Is that what's going on?
Very close.
Okay,
So the phenomenon is called induced demand.
Induced demand.
Induced demand. So what happens is, say you've got a congested highway and you add some more lanes to it. So, the day it opens, there will be less congestion than there was before. But within a couple years, those lanes will fill up to the same or worse, often case worse, congestion levels than they had before. And there are many reasons for this. So part of it is just that, when you open up an opportunity, people take it. So there are more people that will choose to use that road because there's more space available. But the effect is actually quite wide-ranging, because what it also does it is impact the way that development happens. So developers will see, this extra lane capacity is being added on the highway. So now I'm going to build a development even further out of the city because I know there will be space for people to drive into the city, instead of, say, building development closer to the urban core. So a whole bunch of development patterns, developers are looking at what's happening with the road and making decisions about how to develop on that basis. So oftentimes by the time the road is constructed, there's a whole bunch of extra need for the highway that wasn't there before.
Right. So it essentially sparks sprawl.
Yes.
Right? And so if people have a way to get into the city, there's incentive for the developers to build further out, right?
Exactly.
Right.
And the whole sprawl issue is very cyclical. There's a kind of positive feedback loop, because then what happens is you've got all of these additional cars coming into the city. Now you need more space for them in the city. You've got all of these cars. Now you need parking lots for them to park. That means everything in the city starts to get further apart. That means people in the city need to drive. So then you have more cars, and then you need to widen the road again. So it's this perpetual cycle. And that's why we end up in situations, cities that have really embraced this way of developing, like Houston and Los Angeles, have gigantic highways and traffic nightmares that are never ending.
For example, the Katy freeway, right? Like this is often like the big comparative study that people point to as a nightmare, right? It's was it like 25 lanes wide or something? But it's just as bad, or if not worse, from the expansion. And I mean, is this a good example?
Yeah, the Katy freeway is a perfect example of what happens when you expand a highway. So yeah, it's about 26 lanes wide, one of the widest in the world. And after it was expanded, peak commute times increased by about 40%. Because of the whole phenomenon of induced demand that I was describing, increased need for that roadway was created. And so congestion got worse.
That's crazy. So up 40% by the time your commute, it got wider, and then the commute time increased 40%.
Correct.
Is this like well-documented scientific data that, like, why is that ignored? If that is fact, why is that ignored? Like, why can't TxDOT look at that objectively? I imagine TxDOT was part of that project, right? It's a big state freeway. What's the incentive? Is it, I don't know, explain it to me. I'm not asking a question here. I'm just trying to get my head around it.
It's a great question.
Right.
I don't think there's a simple answer. So the first part of your question is this fact? Is this data? Is this controversial? And the answer is yes. It's fact. It's evidence-based. It's not controversial. TxDOT, when push comes to shove, will admit that this project will not alleviate congestion.
Right. So then what's their next line? It doesn't alleviate congestion, but...
I'm trying to stay as close as possible to the sort of language I've heard them use. I think they would say that it enhances mobility.
What does that mean?
What that means is basically more people will drive. So
roads enhance mobility. Great. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, if you think about mobility, the only way to be mobile is in a car, and you think mobility is a good thing, people moving around is good, it increases economic productivity and so forth, then you'll think that the way to enhance mobility is to make more space for cars. Even if everyone in the cars has just as long of a commute and is just as miserable as they were beforehand,
right.
You've increased the cars on the road. And I've been at meetings at the Texas Transportation Commission, and an increase in vehicle miles traveled is regarded as an achievement. It's like, here are our great achievements of the year. We've increased vehicle miles traveled by blah, blah, blah.
Right. Look at everybody using our product.
Exactly.
Right.